Thank you. Good afternoon all, and welcome to the Vale Glamorgan Council's Cabinet meeting of the 5th of February 2026. I'm Councillor Liz Burnett, Chair of the meeting, as the leader and the Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources. As usual, we're using the Council's hybrid platform, and the meeting will be live streamed and recorded and subsequently uploaded to the Vale Glamorgan Council's website. To avoid any background noise, the usual caveats of not turning microphones on when not speaking, and only using the hands up or using the hands up function to raise attention, but not using the chat function. That's purely for any technical issues. So we can move on to the meeting, but just before I do, if you could bear with me. It's been quite a busy few days, and I've just come back from the groundbreaking ceremony at the new Cardiff and Vale College site. And it was quite amazing to hear that the new site there, which hopefully will be in operation by the summer of next year, alongside the site in Rhoose by the airport, which will provide amazing skills and education facilities for Vale young people, is at a cost of £119 million. Quite a phenomenal investment. And they also are going to get involved in the water sports centre that's being developed on the waterfront. So that's really brilliant. I was also able to visit the new extra care housing facility in Penarth. That is moving ahead very, very quickly now. So hopefully we'll have some more photos of that soon. And last but not least, joined British Heart Foundation and a local resident that is mentioned on it at the installation of a brand new bench in Alexandra Park in Penarth. And that, it might not seem a lot, but that bench, they're living benches, and they're for people who are still here because of medical advances. It's really good. But what's super, if you're going through Alexandra Park, have a look out for this bright red bench that was renovated by our park staff, and particularly by one of our young apprentices who've done a superb job on that. So massive thanks from me to that team who have done something really, really worthwhile on that. But without further ado, we can move on to the agenda proper. And the first thing is apologies for absence. Now I know that we're either all in the chamber or online, so we don't have any. That's great, thanks. Next one is agenda item 2 is minutes of the meeting held on, well, 2 meetings, the 8th and the 15th of January 2026. So if I can take those as a true record.
And I'll second those for the record.
Super. And there is no dissent on that. That's good. Agenda item 3 is declarations of interest, and if so the nature of such interest. I haven't been made aware of any. I'll just double check.
No, none made available for this particular meeting.
Super, so that's fine. Then moving on to the first of 3 references that we have today from the Governance and Audit Committee, and that the meeting held on the 16th of December. The first one, agenda item 4, was in relation to temporary accommodation, long-term crisis, which was an Audit Wales report. And there was some interesting discussion in that, and it was talking about how, in relation to the report, the council manages its homelessness services and the future of that. I think it noted the amount of savings that the council has made through the developments over recent years in supporting homelessness, and the that appendix B to the report actually included supporting information that evidences that performance. There was some discussion about the additional pressures that would be faced by the council in terms of the homelessness and social housing allocation bill. And that formed the basis of a recommendation from the committee, which I'll look at. And then there were a few queries in terms of how things work, in terms of homelessness, how we support people, and how we manage that. And again, there were some quite interesting discussions with the committee on that if you're interested, it's worth having a look at. The recommendations that came the first two were from the committee in effect for itself, that they were noting things, but the recommendation 3, they suggested that Cabinet write to Welsh Government to express concern in relation to the homelessness and social housing allocations bill. But if you have a look at recommendation 4, the Chair of Governance and Audit Committee already intends to write to Welsh Government, and I know that I meet with Welsh Government as one of local government leaders. The Cabinet member meets with Welsh Government as part of a network of Cabinet members, and I know our officers do. So I think our views as an authority are very well known to Welsh Government. So I'll leave it to the Chair of Governance and Audit to write to Welsh Government, and I think that we note those recommendations. Are we happy with that?
And I'll second that.
Everyone's happy with that. That's super. So agenda item 5, if I move on to that, and that's the second reference from Governance and Audit, and that's to do with a quarter 2 update on corporate risk. The committee went through that. They talked about things like the development of the marina, cyber security, and looking at how the movement of risk, whether they were sort of going up or down. Subsequently, they made a couple of recommendations. The first 2 were for them. That's where they noted things. The third one was saying that that comments of the Governance and Audit Committee be referred to Cabinet for its consideration, and the comments relating to, as they said, to highlight the increased risks associated with major projects, cyber security and climate change / nature emergency. Well, I think if you have a look at the first paragraph of the reference, the report, as it says, reflects the strategic leadership team's consideration of the recommendations made by the committee, and that is an ongoing process. So I think, and Cabinet work very closely with the senior leadership team. So I think if we note the recommendation from them, recommendation 3, we know that will form part of the conversation that is already ongoing between Cabinet and the senior leadership team. And I'm happy to move that.
And I'll second that recommendation.
Thank you. Again, everyone's happy with that. The third reference, which is agenda item 6, is in relation to progress against external regulatory recommendations, and there was it was an interesting conversation at the meeting. There was only one recommendation that came out of that for us, and it said that the views and recommendations of the Governance and Audit Committee be referred to Cabinet, including endorsing the removal of completed actions from the Strategic Insight Board Insight Tracker. Well, there weren't any direct recommendations for us except that the removal of completed actions from the Strategic Insight Board Insight Tracker, that is a matter for the Strategic Insight Board Insight Tracker. So we'll double check that they are aware of that, and we can note those recommendations. So if I can move that.
And I'll second that recommendation.
Super. Moving on to agenda item 7, and that's the timetable of meetings from May 26 through to May 27. This is housekeeping basically, that we put together a programme that allows all the different committees and things to be planning their forward work plan, what goes on to which committee. I think I have to say this is not set in stone. There will be things that happen where we have to adjust these. Sometimes, as we're well aware, when things like budgets, etc., come through from Welsh Government, then we might move meetings in order for us to deal with those in a timely manner, or if something crops up. But this at the moment is our draft timetable of meetings for the next time, and the recommendations is that the timetable of meetings for May 26 to May 27 are set out in Appendix A to the report be approved, subject to any future changes and arrangements for meetings deemed appropriate by the Mayor of the Council or the relevant committee or meeting chair. And I'd move.
And I'll second that.
And then moving on to agenda item 2 is two. Why did I say that? Agenda item 8. It's been a busy day already, hasn't it? Is the first of 2 reports for the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Sustainable Places. So it's over to you, Bronwyn, for the Biglis to Dinas Powys active travel route.
Okay, thank you very much. So this report is updating Cabinet on how far we've actually got, and it's been some time in the pipeline. As I say, it's the Biglis to Dinas Powys active travel route. So basically, it's about where we've got to date, and then we're looking for delegated powers and funding arrangements to progress the delivery of the actual scheme. So just it's been ongoing for quite some years now. And the actual project comprises a 1.6 mile footway stroke cycleway with associated works, including new crossing facilities at Brynydon. So it's been prioritised by the council post public consultation and the Cardiff Capital Region. And if you look at Appendix A, you've got a map there of the full route that can be seen. So just a little bit of a recap. In 2019-20, WSP consultants undertook the feasibility study and developed 5 route options. But Welsh Government officers advised that there was significant construction costs, and they asked them for further investigative work was needed then before a detailed design could proceed. Then and obviously the additional funding. Also in that same year, we received £62,782 of Welsh Government road safety capital funding, and that was spent on reducing the speed limit to 40 and then enhancing the route as well by installing vehicle activated signs as well as high friction services on the bends. That has improved vehicle speeds along that route, I think quite substantially actually, but obviously there's no pedestrian facilities coming along with that. So in 21-22, Arcadis Consultancy were appointed via the construction consultancy framework. They reviewed all the work undertaken to date on an active travel route connecting Barry then to Dinas Powys, as this has been identified as the highest priority strategic active travel route on our council's active travel network map, and that was also approved in by Welsh Government in 2021. So we've had subsequent funding then from Welsh Government, from the core active travel funding, and that's helped us or enabled us to progress then obviously the detailed design development, the geo-environmental landscape and visual appraisal, arboriculture survey, green infrastructure statement. So that's a bit of a mouthful, that paragraph, is allowed all of that. And we've also undertaken public consultation and engagement. And basically there was an initial consultation 22 and the final design in June 24. Obviously in that area as well, they've undertaken a flood risk assessment there. And planning and SAB statutory approvals are currently away. So the planning application was submitted April 25. And it's also helped us then develop the pre-tender, tendering and construction contract development. And then there's also the land ownership negotiation plans, because the scheme requires acquisition of land, and land ownership has already been investigated, and we've actually instructed land agents Bruton and Knowles to determine the purchase costs with the aim of approaching landowners with options appraisal. So there's 8 parcels of land, and we've got 4 landowners involved with that as well. So I'd say those negotiations are going on. So the latest point is our detailed designs are almost complete. The public consultation and engagement have concluded. A flood consequence assessment has been delivered. The ground investigation survey is underway. Planning permission is under consideration, and that should be early this year now, with SAB approval to follow. Preparations for construction tendering documents are in progress, and as already mentioned, the land ownership negotiations are scheduled to commence early this year as well. So I've got several recommendations. I've got 9 recommendations actually. So the first one is that Cabinet notes progress on design, statutory approvals and preparatory work for the Biglis to Dinas Powys active travel route. 2, that Cabinet approves delegated authority to the Head of Neighbourhood Services in consultation with myself as a Cabinet Member for Sustainable Places, the Executive Leader and Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources, the Chief Executive and Head of Finance, Operational Manager of Financial Services, to proceed with the land and negotiations, tender preparation and the funding applications. 3, that Cabinet endorses the submission of external funding bids to the Regional Transport Authority to secure delivery funding for the scheme. 4, that Cabinet approves delegated authority to the Head of Neighbourhood Services to progress with the construction tender for both the first and second phase of construction of the scheme. 5, that Cabinet approves delegated authority to the Monitoring Officer, Head of Legal and Democratic Services to enter into a new engineering contract for the first and second phase of construction of the scheme. 6, that Cabinet approves delegated authority to the Head of Neighbourhood Services in consultation with myself as Cabinet Member for Sustainable Places, the Executive Leader and Cabinet Member for Performance and Resources, the Chief Executive and Head of Finance Operational Manager Financial Services to enter negotiations for the acquisition of land, and that land is actually identified then in appendices C to G, and that's required for the first and second phases of construction for the scheme, whether by financial consideration or other mutually agreed means. 7, that Cabinet approves delegated authority to the Monitoring Officer, Head of Legal and Democratic Services, to complete all necessary legal documentation associated with the acquisition of land. 8, that Cabinet acknowledges the need and endorses the use of the compulsory purchase order in the public interest should land negotiations fail to proceed. And then lastly, that Cabinet refer the report to full council for consideration, and that's for the use of the delegated powers regarding the use of compulsory purchase orders as a function of full council. And I'd like to move those recommendations.
Thanks, Bron. Do you know, this has been so long coming, hasn't it?
has,
And you know, when you actually look at the connectivity within the Vale, you know, it's fairly flat, isn't it? If we're looking, say, from Barry up to the Mary Harriers in both directions, but yet we've been working for so long on a route through Sully, and we've been working for so long on a route through Dinas Powys. I was pleased to see the crossing at Brynadon, because we need also, as well as having a straight route, to have ways of people to get onto that route, so that they can do part of the journey. Because the really difficult bit, as I said, is from Brynadon into Barry, isn't it? I mean, it's who on earth would want to be cycling along that. It is really a tricky piece of road. So I'm absolutely delighted to second that, and I can see other nodding heads and no dissent online.
Yeah.
So that's agreed. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you.
So back to you then for another report, and again, really much awaited report.
It is. Speaker on. It is indeed. So this report is a review of the pilot leisure activity at Cosmeston Country Park. It's quite a detailed report, so I will go through it in some detail because there's a lot of information which I think is incredibly important as part of that report. So as members will be aware, the Eastern Lake in Cosmeston was previously used for leisure purposes, such as paddleboarding and boating, and then the park also offers several concession sites, including an established cafe building for refreshment operators. However, it is considered, and I fully agree, that there remain opportunities for leisure and commercial activities which could support the wider operation and services offered by both country parks, actually. So our country parks, or the two country parks in the Vale, they're destination venues for both residents and visitors, as well as really important green and blue spaces for local residents to enjoy. They remain pivotal in attracting visitors and are considered vital as open spaces for local residents and to the local economy. However, they do need to adapt to the needs of the users, and also about development of new sustainable activities and attractions, which will actually improve the offer and enhance greater footfall. And then that in turn allows further investment to maintain and enhance these incredibly important spaces. And I'm sure residents will sort of join me in recognising how important these green spaces are to support all of our well-being and healthy lifestyles. As part of the placemaking work undertaken in the four main towns, and particularly in Penarth, the potential for more leisure activities at the park in the school summer holidays was identified as important to residents and young peoples. And in fact, I think I'd like to qualify that as an increasing number of young people are saying about the activities that they would like to see within our parks and within the Vale, and that came out really strongly. So piloting a leisure use on the water in Cosmeston has allowed the council to consider how we can support the use of our green and blue spaces as a big part of the future of our wider reshaping programme, and also then about supporting the sustainability of the country parks into the future and into our future generations, and that is so important for us to do. And at the same time, they're recognising the importance of biodiversity, ecology, wildlife and nature, and understanding all of that. And this is central to the council's thinking when considering the long-term future of the country parks. Diversification of the offer at the country parks must, as a consequence, help support the important nature conservation and biodiversity work which is undertaken in the parks by the council and volunteers. And there's a lot of that going on at all times throughout the year, and I think it's really important that plays a crucial part within this. And it's also recognised about the really important role in supporting the council's actions to deal with the declared nature and climate emergency. I think it's important to note that increasing and improving the offer at the country parks is not a simple exercise, particularly with the competing pressures around long-term funding and the need, as already mentioned, to support the ecology and biodiversity alongside the different expectations of the users of the parks. And it's against this context that the recent trial of the aqua park at Cosmeston should be assessed, and that a consideration of the next steps should be taken. This is alongside a consideration of any other possible income generation activities in both parks, which could also provide support. So just to refer then to the aquapark itself. So following an approach by an aquapark operator who was previously located in Cardiff Bay, it was agreed to run a pilot operation for an aquapark on the Eastern Lake at Cosmeston Country Park for a trial period only. It was recognised that this was a trial or pilot exercise, and it would only be for a very short period of time. And what it would allow us then is to carry out a full assessment of the impact of the activity to be undertaken based on a relatively short period of the summer, running approximately July to early September. And I think in the end, I think it actually operated for 10 weeks just during that period. And really importantly is the West Lake remained activity free and will always be retained solely for wildlife all year round. And in addition, and irrespective of the possible or potential leisure-based uses of the water, all water-based activities on the Eastern Lake are required to cease from the 1st of November until the 28th of February of the following year. And this ensures that the overwintering wildlife populations are not disturbed. And then more widely, and irrespective of the aquapark trial, improving our leisure offer at the country parks is key to their financial sustainability and allows the council to continue to support all residents and visitors by ensuring that these important sites are not only well maintained and managed, but are available to residents without the need to charge for entry. And by opening the country parks to sustainable leisure uses, the council and countryside team can also continue to support, fund and develop the important ecology and biodiversity projects at these sites. Now, the trial operators were very mindful of the country park's important role in providing spaces for residents and visitors to enjoy, and sought to minimise the impact of any operation by locating any off-water sport facilities away from the lakeside and in an area away from the main park, and which is exactly what they did. Furthermore, in the future, there is potential of expanding the country park sites, particularly in Cosmeston, making more land available to address the nature emergency through rewilding, tree planting, and by increasing biodiversity. Appropriate leisure operations could help us fund any future improvements to the parks, recognising the importance they have to both residents and visitors alike. Maintaining and growing the visitor base to the parks is also important to support those existing facilities, such as the cafe and other concessions. And I've already referred about the placemaking, about the younger people, how they highlighted about what they would actually like to see, and for people to actually take part in, particularly over the school summer holidays. So, and having regard to all of that, we did agree in a previous report then that an assessment of the pilot activity would be undertaken and a further report brought to Cabinet which will assess the outcome of the pilot leisure scheme and present options for the future, and this is what I'm bringing to you here today. So in relation to the assessment, we considered 5 key elements: visitor numbers, financial impact, water quality and safety, environmental and ecological impact, and community and stakeholder feedback. So to address the visitor numbers and financial impact, we've used in 211 there, you'll see that the organisations and people that we've used then to actually to assess all of that, which includes tourism advisors, GTS, and based on visitor data as well provided by the aquapark, and also the Vale of Glamorgan, what they call STEAM tourism features. So the aquapark attracted around 16,000 visitors, including participants and spectators. Visitors spent a total of £645,000. So the average spend per person, including ticket costs, food and drink, transport and other expenses, was around £40 a head. So including indirect effects, the total economic impact of the aquapark was £960,000. And of that economic input, 22% was generated by Vale and Glamorgan residents, and 78% by those from other areas, which included holidaymakers. In relation to the respect of water quality and general safety of the activity, it should be noted that prior to the pilot commencing, officers sought advice from shared regulatory services who established then a water testing regime that supports a risk-based approach to safeguarding public health. And that's incredibly important. It was at the front of our minds at all times. So this regime included regular sampling and monitoring to ensure that any deterioration in water quality was promptly identified and, if necessary, addressed. Water analysis was undertaken at a Public Health Wales laboratory, with sampling carried out in 2 separate regimes by both the council and Aqua Park staff. And the methods used were consistent with those previously employed by the council, so they were tried and tested. All samples that were taken in the vicinity of the Aqua Park operators were within the relevant thresholds for both E. coli and enterococci. It should also be noted that prior to the activity commencing, tests were undertaken in respect of the condition of the bottom of the lake through a diving survey, a water chemistry report, a Legionella disease report, and a heavy metal report, all of which were within acceptable parameters. A water sample was taken from the far side of the lake on 21st of August by park rangers, which did fall into the poor category in terms of E. coli and enterococci. However, this was an isolated result, and multiple samples were taken throughout August by both Aqua Park and Council, and they were all all return results within accepted parameters. And to add on to that, samples taken prior to the 21st of August and throughout September from the far side of the lake have consistently shown results within acceptable levels. So what that does appear to be is that that result on the 21st of August was an isolated anomaly. There was a full health and safety risk assessment was prepared by the operators before operations even commenced, and during the pilot, full records were kept of all injuries which occurred to customers of the activity, and that's in accordance with the operating norms as set out in risk assessment, and all injuries were fully recorded. There were a low number of injuries actually, and they were mostly cuts and bruises from lounging awkwardly. And as Aqua Park staff were trained in first aid, and in all cases a full report was completed in accordance with that risk assessment. Okay, so then we move on to the environmental and ecological impact. Now, it's important to note that the country park and the lake is recorded as an SSSI, which is a site of special scientific interest. And as part of that, we had to obtain formal assent then from Natural Resource Wales for the activity to take place, and this was granted on the 23rd of May. And there is an actually link from the report into that if anybody would like to read that. So the assent contained several conditions regarding the operation of the activity, and then the operators themselves produced an ecological report both during and after the activity ceased, and that can also be found on the web on our webpage on our site. So there's a link that'll take you straight into that as well. Notwithstanding these reports, which were prepared by a local ecologist, the Council commissioned a further independent report from Thomson Environmental Consultants to provide a full assessment of the activity, the reports produced, and to consider the impact of the pilot. And then, irrespective of those reports already commissioned, a new baseline survey was undertaken then, which included developing a monitoring, mitigation and enhancement strategy in 2026. And this be implemented in advance of any future leisure operation as well. So this strategy should be informed by a full year of breeding bird surveys in the absence of potential impacts. This would ensure that the impacts of a more long-term use over several seasons could be properly monitored. The report further notes that habitats within the site will inevitably change over time through either management, active or absent, and succession. Bird populations and distributions at the site will also likely change over time, partly in response to habitat changes. Therefore, at least some elements of the survey, monitoring, mitigation and enhancement strategy should be implemented during each operational year of any leisure activities on the water. So the aim of this would be to ensure that site population and distribution changes, particularly of Schedule 1 species, but also to nesting birds, do not lead to any breaches in legislation. And the strategy should be designed and supported by a suitably qualified ornithologist with sufficient knowledge of the site, and I think that's really important, and familiarity with all species involved. And the strategy should also include, or should include, the following, which is use of habitat assessment and mapping to inform targeted survey effort, and that's including the number of visits required, reference to habitats as justification for potential presence or absence of species, and then gathering a data set which includes the optimum periods for detecting target species according to best practice guidelines, adapting survey methods as required depending on results, and acknowledging that breeding pairs may use different nest sites within and between years, including in response to changes in habitat suitability for nesting, monitoring bird use at the site and implementing control measures as necessary to avoid legislative breaches or negative impacts on breeding birds, increasing nesting and foraging opportunities for priority species, and that from the Bird Survey and Assessment Steering Group 25, and using CLCP in the long term alongside suitable management techniques to avoid conflict between the aquapark and the local conservation status of breeding birds. A full year of breeding surveys during 2026 in the absence of activities to inform monitoring, mitigation and enhancement requirements. And this recommendation will be incorporated into the management of Cosmeston during 2026 and will directly inform any tender process for a future leisure operator subject to the outcome of the survey. In relation to community response, I think most people and members will be aware that there was significant community concerns regarding the announcement of the pilot activities, and these mainly centred around the impact of the activity on the SSSI status of the park and the wider impact on ecology and wildlife, including birds, mammals and other species. Whilst a significant number of objections to the operation were received, the majority of these were received before the commencement of the aquapark operations and were focused through the Vale Action Group, VAG, and their members. 7,585 signature petition was obtained, with signatures obtained on change.org was submitted, and this was around halting the installation of the aquapark as Cosmeston. Now, interestingly, analysis of that petition showed that 2,874 signatories came from the Vale of Glamorgan, with the largest number from Penarth, which stands at 1,212. And I think we need to record as well that formal responses were provided to all correspondents who made email or written contact with the council, providing advice and explaining the nature and duration of the pilot. And I think I will like to add in there, despite rumours and allegations around that. So the VAG submission also made a 230-page submission following the closure and removal of the aquapark, which can also be reviewed in the background papers. And in response to the issues raised in this submission, it should be noted that the trial was permitted to allow the council to fully assess the impact of the leisure activity. But it should also be noted that before it was undertaken and during its operation, contact was maintained with both the appointed ecologist and Natural Resources Wales. The council notes that the VAG submission included surveys of visitors to the park, although these surveys were not discussed with or agreed by the council in advance. Unfortunately, we cannot there make a judgment on whether the surveys were representative of the visitors to the park. Moreover, the surveys were not set within the relevant context of how the parks themselves would be funded in the future. And it's also important to note that the council does have evidence through its car parking receipts that there was an uplift in visitor numbers for the months of July and August. And while some of this could be attributed to the good weather during that period, the additional leisure offer is also clearly relevant. While ecology and biodiversity information was submitted as part of the report from VAG, it's noted that none of this work has been undertaken by an ecologist, and in response, the council is satisfied that the information provided by ASA is robust, and furthermore, a formal independent assessment was undertaken by an ecologist appointed by the council, who has made further recommendations. Issues of a perceived increase in antisocial behaviour have also been raised and attributed to the aqua park operation, but a review with park rangers and staff has indicated there was no increase in the amount of antisocial behaviour, including people entering the water over the period of the park, and that was very similar to 2024 and previous years. In conclusion, while the concerns of some local residents and users of the park were noted, it is considered that the preparatory work undertaken by the council in advance of the aqua park coming to Cosmeston was sufficient in respect of its pilot and short-term nature of the use, and the information which was obtained was invaluable in preparing a longer-term strategy for leisure uses in Cosmeston. This information will also be supported by a full baseline ecological assessment to be undertaken in 2026, which will further revise the leisure strategy in with NRW. So I'm going to move on to the next steps, because, but I know I've taken some time to go over a lot of the detail of that, but I think it's really important to do that and to set that out into the public domain, as well as for people who want to read that report. So, next steps. And I think we've got to note that we've taken a cautious approach to developing income-generating activities in the country parks. And then in trialling a one-off part year for water leisure activities, we've been able to fully consider the impact of such an activity on the operation of the park and its important role. It is important to note that the council could have proceeded to offer an extension to the existing trial period if it so wished. However, being mindful of the park's importance to local residents, wider leisure uses, and to wildlife and ecology generally, and having regard to the outcome of the review of the 2025 activity, we consider the development of a baseline assessment of the wider ecology and wildlife at Cosmeston, alongside a further assessment of the future direction of the Cosmeston Country Park and potential income generation opportunities at the country park is appropriate. While it's important to recognise the need to find alternative funding to support the work undertaken in our country parks on the ongoing difficult budgetary position, as a council, we're going to take a decision to pause and reflect on the pilot activity undertaken in 2025, whilst also considering what other opportunities may be explored, including, but not restricted to, water-based activities. And this is to ensure the long-term sustainability of the park. So I'm going to move then to some recommendations. Just bear with me. So I've got 6 recommendations. One is that Cabinet notes the report, which recognises A, the increase in visitor numbers to the park and associated expenditure associated with the aqua park leisure activity. B, the ecology reports from the operators, ecologist and an ecologist commissioned by the council, which notes from an ecological and legal standpoint, the aqua park's operation was compatible with the continued breeding of protected species on site, and overall, the available data set indicates that breeding by key species occurred successfully during the aquapark's operational trial, with bird use of the site being broadly equivalent to the 2022 baseline dataset available for the site. C, the concerns expressed by some residents and use of the park in correspondence and demonstrations, and noting the petitions received which sought to prevent the aquapark trial. 2, that Cabinet notes the outcome of the trial undertaken in summer 2025, which has now concluded, and in advance of any further decisions being made on future water and land-based activities, authorises the undertaking of a comprehensive review of options and opportunities for activities that exist at Cosmeston Country Park, and this will help sustain the long-term future of the country park status. 3, that as part of a review of options, the council or its agents will undertake a further full year of breeding bird surveys in 2026, in the absence of potential impacts such as leisure operations on the water, and that the Council and Natural Resources Wales agree a further baseline survey, monitoring, mitigation and enhancement strategy well in advance of any future leisure installation and operation at the park. 4, that in pursuance of recommendations 2 and 3, the Council also undertakes a further full 12 months of water quality testing in the specific area identified for leisure uses during the aquapark trial, and that this testing be undertaken weekly during June, July, August and September. 5, that subject to the agreement of recommendations 2, 3 and 4, a further report be presented to Cabinet in late 2026 to advise the outcomes of the work undertaken in regard to a review of options, the baseline assessment and water quality testing, so that any future operations can be considered and, if appropriate, agreed. And lastly, that this report be referred to Place Scrutiny Committee for consideration, and that any recommendations be referred back to Cabinet for further consideration. And I'd like to move those recommendations.
Thank you, Bron. A comprehensive report, and
It was, but I thought it was important to actually go through a lot of that detail.
No, it was.
Yeah.
It was very, very, very helpful. And I know, I mean, I hopefully this will answer, because I know that Councillor Thomas, a local member, and originally, well, before we actually saw this,
Councillor Rhoose Thomas,
had actually said to us right at the start that it would be a good idea to explore in terms of economic impact, in terms of local employment. And I think that what we've got here is, through having that trial, we have the data that we can use to go forward. And I think, for me, paragraph 1.6 says it all, because I know that through our interactions with people over the past year, we know that people are passionate about our country parks, aren't they? They absolutely are, totally committed, but for different reasons.
Yeah.
And so some people go there because they're quiet. Some people go there to walk their dog. Some people go there to take their children and whatever. Some people go there and jump into the water in places where they shouldn't. You know, I mean, there are a whole range of things. There are activities we're interested in the bird life. We absolutely are interested in that, the species. But, you know, what species? Because if we still had mink in Cosmeston, as we have in the past, we wouldn't have any waterfalls, because they would have eaten them.
Gosh, no.
So there are a whole range of considerations that have come in. And I hope that, you know, if by this going to scrutiny, we can have a really, really thorough consideration. I mean, I know it's been to scrutiny before. People had said, no, it hadn't. But, you know,
it did.
It did. It went,
a very detailed discussion was had.
Yeah. So it will go back to scrutiny. And I would ask that, whatever reason you use Cosmeston for, have a look at this report. Register to speak. Come to the scrutiny. Make your views known. And there's one group that I would particularly like to say, you know, please make your views known. Superb group called Glamorgan Birds Club, and they keep records of the birds right through.
They go
the area.
a lot, and they've got a
They
huge.
do.
They've got a huge amount of knowledge of Cosmeston.
So it would be really,
Yeah.
really good to get their views
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've got any contacts with them. I would imagine that we have, but you know, they've just published a bird survey for 2024, which is up to about what, 6 months before
Yeah.
the trial started. So that would be quite interesting as well. But I think it's been covered enough for enough, and no doubt there will be recommendations back to us. So I am very, very pleased to second those recommendations. I can't see any indications, so everyone's happy with that. So that's agreed.
Thank you.
So you can have a rest while we move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 10, and this is some good news. This is a report from the Cabinet Member for Education, Arts and the Welsh Language, and it's an update on the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme. Over to you, Rhiannon.
Thank you. Can you hear me? People keep freezing on my screen. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Birch. Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you very much. So, as Councillor Burnett has said, this is a good news story. We're looking to update and improve Sully Primary School. So, following Cabinet approval for the rolling programme on the 7th of March 24, we submitted a strategic outline programme to Welsh Government, identifying the projects under the next wave of investment, one of which was Sully Primary School. The projects under the programme were anonymised within the report due to needing to seek capital funding before proceeding, but these individual projects are approved as part of the programme but are subject to individual business case approval. We submitted the rolling programme to Welsh Government by the March deadline. The list of projects were also anonymised. The Council received an approval of their rolling programme August 24. So we require approval to formally add Sully Primary School into the Sustainable Communities for Learning capital programme as an identified project, and approval to submit the strategic outline case for Sully Primary School. So I'd like to offer some background on this. Sustainable Communities for Learning programme is a long-term strategic investment in the educational estate throughout Wales. You've seen the benefit of that within our own county if you look around and see the new schools that have been built in the last few years under our administrations. It is a unique collaboration between Welsh Government, the Welsh Local Government Association, the WLGA, local authorities, colleges and diocesan authorities. The Sustainable Communities for Learning rolling programme requires the Council to meet the following investment objectives: addressing growth in demand for Welsh medium education, elimination of surplus capacity and inefficiency in the system. We're very keen to see that. Expansion of schools in areas of increased demand for educational services, and address condition of educational assets and making assets available for community use where demand exists. Following Cabinet approval for the rolling programme March 24, the Council submitted its strategic outline programme to Welsh Government, identifying the projects under the next wave of investment, one of which was Sully Primary. We received approval for the rolling programme August 24. Sully Primary School proposed to be delivered within years 1 to 3 of the rolling programme. November 25, it was agreed for Section 106 contributions to be spent on Sully Primary School, following consultation with the Education and Planning Cabinet members and the Director of Education. Further information on funding is in the Section 5 of this extensive of our report here. The current school is a classroom short of a 2-form entry school and has multiple demountables which are over 20 years old, with overall condition and suitability rated as C. Surveys indicate over 800,000 in backlog maintenance. The school site faces significant challenges, including severe space deficiency within the hall and kitchen, falling between 30% and 40% below building bulletin recommendations. Any development must comply with Welsh Government net zero carbon standards for new builds, alongside upgrades to existing structures to demonstrate low carbon improvement. Cabinet approval is required to formally include Sully Primary School into the programme, increase the envelope, and to proceed with the submission of the strategic outline case to Welsh Government by the end of this month. Further cabinet approval will be required, concluding the tender and appointment of the successful contractor. So, 3 recommendations: to seek cabinet approval to formally add Sully Primary School into the Sustainable Communities for Learning programme, increasing the programme envelope by 9,350,000. To seek cabinet approval to submit the strategic outline case for Sully Primary School, and to seek cabinet approval to increase and reprofile this scheme in the capital programme as set out in paragraph 5.4 of this report. So I'd like to move those recommendations, please.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Really, really good news. And as I mentioned at the start of the meeting, that at the moment, they're just starting work on the Cardiff Vale College. And I actually need to add up just how much we've spent on new schools since 2012. And it's how many hundreds of millions we've spent in terms of supporting young people. And this is the next in a very long list. So really, really good, and good news for Sully. Thank you. I can't see any dissent at all. I'd be very surprised if there was. So that's agreed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 11, that's a report of the Cabinet Member for Neighbourhood and Building Services. And so it's over to Councillor Wilson. Mark.
Thank you very much, Leader. And thank you. This report is basically what we call an objection report. And it's concerning to implement a traffic road order to reduce speed limits on section of Port Road West, Barry, Port Road, Rhoose, and Porthkerry Road, Rhoose. And we did it following a comprehensive and evidence-led highway safety assessment. The route was prioritised as part of the Council's strategic road safety programme after analysis of collision data identified 8 personal injury collisions over a 3-year period, which, considering how safe our roads generally are in the Vale, quite high, given that context, including 3 serious incidents. Several collisions were linked to a loss of control and inappropriate speed, particularly at junctions, bends, and areas of roadside activity. These findings clearly demonstrate the need for proportionate intervention to reduce risk and collision severity. Traffic surveys were undertaken in March 2024 and recorded a mean speed of 38 miles per hour and an 85% percentile speed of 44 miles per hour, confirming that a 40 miles per hour speed limit aligns with existing driver behaviour and the character of the road. The proposal also includes an extension of the 30 limit around the Cwm Kiddy Public House to improve safety for pedestrian accessing bus stops and crossing the carriageway, as I know many people do, because most people, the vast majority of people who attend pubs, go there, obviously enjoying themselves, but they get there because obviously they do not want to drink and drive. The scheme has secured funding of £177,000 of Welsh Government Road Support Grant funding for 25-26, awarding following external assessment of the scheme's robustness, value for money, and safety benefits. Failure to proceed would place this funding at risk and undermine the Council's ability to deliver planned safety improvements within the timescales. Statutory consultation has been undertaken in full, and all representations have been carefully considered. Officers remain satisfied the proposal was necessary, reasonable, and defensible, and it supports the Council's statutory duty to improve highway safety. Cabinet approval will ensure timely implementation of the traffic road order, ensure delivery of a fully funded safety scheme, and demonstrate clear leadership in reducing the risk and severity of road traffic collisions for residents, consumers, and visitors. And then I'm going to move to the recommendations, of which there are 2, that Cabinet considers and overrules the objections and removes support from South Wales Police for the reasons contained within this report, and approves the proposed traffic order, TRO, and that the objectors and South Wales Police are devised of decision, and I so move.
Thank you, Mark. I think a good move for road safety in that area, and I'm happy to second. I can't see anybody dissenting, so again that's agreed. Thank you. The next agenda item is agenda item 12. That's a report of the Cabinet Member for Social Care and Health in relation to the Shared Lives scheme. So over to you, Eddie.
Thank you, Leader. This is one of those reports that you look at the numbers it's impacting on. Is we're talking about 29 carers. It used to be called, it's part of the Shared Lives system. It used to be called the Adult Placement, and what it is individuals are placed with support, whether accommodation, and just enables them to stay in the community. There are 29 that have that facility, and there's 20 that we have that have the respite care and whatever. So this report has been brought forward. We're in a partnership with Bridgend, and as part of that partnership, it's been going since 2019. It initially was for a 1 year term. It was extended for 5 years, and we've just extended it this year for another 5 years, so it's up to 2030. And in that time, we've talked about the differences between those within the Bridgend and the Vale that get different benefits. So they're looking at changing the funding, the system fund, and it's key that in the report it talks about what the payments are for individuals. But at the moment, it doesn't take into consideration the complexity or the support that's required for those individuals. So this report is trying to address that, and in doing so, it needs to be common across both Bridgend and the Vale. So we're coming up with a banding system, and that will then identify where the individual fits in with certain categories, and then they can get the support that they require at the level they need. Again, it's not a once-off. It will be reviewed on a regular basis, and there's, in fact, between the Bridgend and Vale, they've got a strategic team that monitor and check on the care and support that's being provided. So the report is quite comprehensive, and as I've just said, it talks about the funding requirements, and the key message is that people will fit in with the different bands, but we made sure there's no detriment from what they're currently receiving to what they will get on this new system. But as with any change, it's important that we actually consult with those it's impacting on. So as part of this report, we're actually looking to provide a 12-week consultation with those individuals that utilise the service, and discussions have already been taken. So there's an indication that that there is support for it, but it needs to be formal. The consultation needs to be formalised just to make sure that we can get full buy-in for it. I think that's covered most of the things that I want to say. So the recommendations on the report are to endorse a 12-week consultation period, and with the Shared Lives carers about the proposed changes, and they're going to commence in February 2026. The Cabinet, the second recommendation is key to taking into to understand what the consultation is actually doing rather than just make a decision. So the second recommendation is Cabinet endorses the Director of Social Services and Cabinet Member for Social Care and Health to implement the new banded system, having given due regard to the feedback received from the consultation process. And so it's important to recognise that we will be taking on, alongside the regional partners, the feedback we're hoping is predominantly supportive of the new arrangements, and we'll go from there. I so move the recommendations. Thank you.
Sorry. My mic was a bit slow coming on there, Eddie. I bet you were wondering where I was. Yeah, this is I mean, it's an amazing scheme, isn't it? The Shared Lives scheme, and I think that there's been some information shared about it previously, and anything we can do to improve, but working in collaboration so that we co-create arrangements. That's absolutely brilliant. So very, very happy to agree those recommendations, or to second those recommendations. And I can see people nodding in here, no dissent online. So they're agreed. Thank you. So the final report of today is over to the Cabinet Member for Community Engagement, Equalities and Regulatory Services. And I believe this has actually been to us once before, Ruba, but it's coming back to us now. And that's the Annual Equality Monitoring Report for 2024-25. So over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, so you're right. You'll remember that I first brought this report in September for consideration, and then we asked that the Live Well Scrutiny Committee look at the report. You'll be pleased to know that they looked at the report and agreed the report. So I'm bringing it back today for us to agree that it should be published. This final version is agreed, and that it should be published before the end of March. So a very short mention from me. So I'd move that those recommendations.
Thanks, Ruba. I think they not only agreed it, they endorsed it, didn't they? So so that was very
Yes.
positive. So yes, very happy to second that, and as is everybody else
Definitely.
in Cabinet. So that's agreed. Thank you. So I don't have any urgent items under Part 1, and neither do I have any confidential items under Part 2. So if I could bring the meeting to a close, and thank you all for your attendance today. And if we could all just hold fire until the Democratic Services Officer has confirmed that the live stream and recording have been stopped. Thank you.